Right on this King's birthday Monday, I'm James Squared. I've got two Jameses tonight, the National Affairs Editor at The Telegraph, Sky host James Morrow, and Pauline Hanson's Chief of Staff, One Nation's James Ashby. Welcome to you both. James Morrow, I'll start with you. We now have trend in these polls, and I always like to look at trend. This is the first news poll that's got One Nation ahead of Labor. Of course, we've had that with Redbridge for a number of polls. Last week, Sky's Pulse poll also showed this result. It's a significant jump up there in primary for One Nation, 31 down to Labor 30, and the Coalition losing 3 to 18. Give me your take on this.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, isn't it, Peter? One of the really interesting things to do also is to track how these various polls, News Poll, the Sky News Pulse, and some of the other ones, the Redbridge, how they've all tracked and the curve that they've followed of support for One Nation. And I saw a really interesting analysis today, Peter, which suggested that the same curve over time maps almost exactly to the support for the no case for the Voice, and that this is, another one of these instances where Australians are saying, they did it with the Voice and they're doing it now again, saying we are fed up with the political class. I think it's a huge worry now for the Coalition because, I've been talking to people in Country Victoria today and New South Wales, and the people they're speaking to, yes, there's a lot of people who are just angry at the Coalition, who are former Coalition members, but there's a lot of people out there who are former Labor people now who are going and are feeling like neither the Coalition nor the Labor Party obviously has solutions to a system that they think is fundamentally broken. And it's really fascinating to see here that I think it's more than just parking a vote now. It's a real desire. It's that 2016 thing in America to just flip the table because what we've got now is not working. That's what people are saying.
Well, James, there's a lot of experts that think they're experts on Sky News about One Nation polling. You're fair income, so I've got to ask you, this looks to me beyond just a blow the show up vote. I mean, I know people have been saying that today, all the commentators sitting here on Sky. I think it's more than that. I think there's now a hope in this vote. People are hoping for a new Australia or perhaps a return to the Australia they feel is lost. So there's a positive in this vote. It's not just blow the show up. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, look, the more that Paul Kelly and others of his ilk come out and say that this is just a flash in the pan sort of moment, I love it when they say that. I'm just waiting for it to come off the boil. The difference is, though, it just continues to grow. And look, I know we've got a long way to go before we oust this toxic Labor government, but the reality is it's within reach and we're 2 years out from an election. Now, obviously, Labor have still got time to turn things around, but I think after this budget that's been delivered, there is more and more people, even who would typically vote for Labor, who are saying, look, they're done. We can't back this party any longer, and we're turning to somebody, not the Liberal Party, they're turning to One Nation, and I don't think that will change. Labor voters will not go to the Liberal Party, and Liberal Party voters will not go to Labor. So we're that midway point, and they're seeing a sensible policy that's been put forward, and we're about to roll out a whole swag of very well-known, very credible candidates in the next 6 months. And I think when that happens, that's when you'll see a fresh surge.
Yeah, it's interesting, James. If you look back at the election last year, One Nation had 6% of the vote. And, of course, the Libs then put in Susan Lee, and she basically said on day one in her first press conference, we don't believe in anything. We're going to review all of our policies. And, of course, there was this massive, massive tanking of the Coalition's vote from there. I think that's the Liberal Party's pinch point. And Bondi, we saw that really significant spike coming to One Nation. But on the other side, on the Labor side, the pinch point's the budget, isn't it?
Yeah, no,
it sure has been. It's killed them. And it's not
James Morrow, you first. James Morrow, I'll come to you first. James Morrow.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, I think the budget and Bondi, those are the two things that crystallized this opposition to Labor. That is where I think the vote really started flooding out of Labor. And you had a lot of people, you had people like Kosamaris out there saying, no, this is only a Liberal phenomenon. It's just a shifting of the deck chairs on the right. But those two things there, Bondi and the budget, they both represented a fundamental reordering of society that people didn't like. Bondi was, of course, crystallizing all of the worries that we had about, migration and Islamic fundamentalism and everything we'd seen since October 7th. And then the budget comes in, and that crystallizes this whole other problem, Peter, which is, who do we work for? Does the government work for us, or do we work for the government? Which is where Albanese is taking this. And so those two things, that's taken people, not just people on the right, but all over the place, I think, over to one nation.
James Ashby. I watched with interest the blow-up about the housing policy brouhaha last week. Barnaby said this, and then he had to backtrack it, made some phone calls, all of that stuff. You look at that, you look at the issue you've got with your WA senator who may or may not be in breach of Section 44. I don't think people care. It's a bit like issues with Farage or a little bit of Trump's history before he ran for president. I think people have they've had a look. They know that none of the individuals are perfect. They've sort of factored that into their bottom line, and it's not moving them at all. In fact, the more the media comes down on Hanson or down on, say, Joyce over housing policy, the more they say, well, bugger off media, you're part of the problem. You keep backing in these two main parties. They've let me down. And there's a discount factor applied to what the media say.
Well, on the Tyrone Whitten matter, there is no Section 44 issue. We know that Snowy Hydro is a corporation. This has been tested once before in our High Court. So we know that there is no issue on Section 44. As for Barnaby, look, mistakes happen on live TV and pre-record. The point to this is Barnaby corrected the record, unlike the Prime Minister, who still tries to claim that he never fell off a stage, and that's been captured on video and played countless times. So, look, we're not perfect. No politician is. Any politician who does say they're perfect is a liar to start with. And look, we will get things wrong from time to time, but it's about being honest with the Australian public and say when you do get those things wrong and move on. Simple as that.
Ditch the witch, James. Give me your take on this.
Well, I think if I lived in Melbourne, whether I was a man or a woman, I'd be a lot more offended by the things that are going on in the streets of Melbourne, machete fights, torching of restaurants and hospitality venues, than I would by, some clownish billboard going around the streets. This is such a distraction, and it's ridiculous to see the Premier there in Victoria do the whole sort of woe is me, I'm so offended by this thing. Okay, sure, it's offensive. Sure, it's not nice. But this is such a distraction from the chaotic, corrupt, broke, bankrupt, crime-ridden government that we have in Victoria. They love this. They're playing this up as much as they can. But, this does not deserve to be a big story.
Yeah, James Morrow's right there, James Ashby. Labor, particularly Victorian Labor, but, Gillard weighed in and Albanese weighed in. They're all grabbing this, they're clutching at this straw as hard as they can.
Yeah, look, it's one thing for Jacinta Allen to play the victim, but when I saw the Prime Minister's comments today basically saying don't go the personal attacks, that is precisely what this man does. And I've seen it firsthand. Pauline Hanson has had her staff reduced down to 2 personal staff under this Prime Minister. It has been nothing but a personal attack. No, he didn't use cheap words like witch, but he's treating Pauline Hanson like a witch and anyone who is in opposition to him by starving her of staff. It's as good as putting a placard saying ditch the witch, but he's just doing it in a cunning, sly way, and that's the act of this Prime Minister. I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him. His words are empty, they're hollow, and so is the man. He's got nothing up top. He just likes to play the game. He loves to play the victim, and he will do anything to win in this next election, even if that means robbing every household when it comes to taxes and pretending, I've just changed my views on things.
Well, look at the smoke and mirrors, James Morrow, in relation to Bondi. In the aftermath, he made it all about lax gun laws, or so he claimed. We all know that that's not what it's about. It was absolutely about radical Islam, Islamic extremism. He couldn't even bring himself to use those phrases. He had to hide away in Canberra. He was there in the dead of night for the first time with his cheap little bunch of flowers, and then he moved on. And it was left to everybody else, Chris Minns and others, to stand up and deal with the community outrage. But it's telling now, if you look at his so-called gun deal, he might get New South Wales, but even all the other Labor states, James Morrow, they've walked away.
Well, they have walked away because it was a nonsense proposition from the start of it. I mean, if you look at the homicide statistics in this country and you take Bondi out of them, you know, firearms homicides from licensed firearms are incredibly, vanishingly rare. It almost never happens. And so this idea that there's all these guns out there in people's gun safes that need to be, you know, taken away and bought back and all that because they're posing some sort of existential threat was a complete nonsense. I'm very glad to see that this thing is falling apart. But it's part of the whole distraction, you know, oh, it's just extremism in general. You know, it could have been right-wing extremism, could have been Islam, we don't know, could have been anything. And it's part of the tricky distraction politics because they see the crisis Bondi over here, and then they say, oh, you know what we'd love to go have another crack at the farmers with their guns. It's so transparent.
James, I wrote about this, James Morrow. I'll get your comment because I know you've not long been in the States, but I was driving around the back blocks of the western part of Melbourne, and I found all this stuff just dumped by the side of the road. I mean, fridges, prams, beds, couches. I saw a guy that looked to me as if he was offloading a rusted out hot water system. You walk down Melbourne, some parts of Melbourne in the CBD, it looks like Mogadishu. The beautiful Western civilization of our cities in Australia and many in Europe as well, that they're starting to look very third world. So all credit to President Trump. I know he has his critics, but he said he would clean up Washington. He would make it look like America's capital again. We've seen already the Lincoln Memorial. It's filling up with water. It looks absolutely fantastic. It's beautiful. We've got that Columbus fountain too. There was a whole lot of graffiti on that. It's now operating as it should. All the stone has been cleaned. It's that one there. You can see what it looked like under Joe Biden, what it looks like now under President Trump. This has got to be a real shot in the arm for DC, doesn't it, James Morrow?
Absolutely, Peter. I mean, everybody should take a page out of this book. All the mayors in big cities. What you're saying about Melbourne is so spot on. The last time I was in Melbourne for the F1, it was just, you know, it was grim walking around the CBD. I used to love to go to Melbourne, and what's happened to Melbourne is a disgrace. But DC, you know, I went to university there. I've lived in Washington, D.C. And again, that city was allowed to run down. It's a beautiful city with all this neoclassical architecture. The Statues Union Station should be one of the most beautiful train stations in the entire world. Good on Trump for fixing this stuff because, you know what, he doesn't go and do 12 years of consultation and environmental impact statements and, you know, working out whether we need placards saying that Columbus was actually a terrible person and all of this stuff. He says, no, okay, we need to get guys to clean the statues. We need somebody to fix the pool. This is what happens when you have a builder in this role. And I think it's, you know, beyond partisan politics. I just think it's great. I love to see it. I'd love to see it everywhere in these cities.
I'd love to see more of it in Australia. I'd like to see lawns mowed. I'd like to see rubbish picked up, all the basics done. Thank you to you both.